I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, we're hearing from an Indigenous former Toronto police officer who is living in poverty despite being awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars by the court.
So I'm living really in a developed nation as a third world person. After 30 years of service with the Toronto Police Service.
Ralph Thistle lives in a cabin without running water. 9 months after being awarded years of back pay, he hasn't received any of the money. Plus,
as of this morning, everyone in Toronto, including young people aged 12 to 17, is eligible to book an accelerated second dose of COVID-19 vaccine.
Toronto opens up hundreds of thousands of new vaccine spots. It comes as the city hits a major vaccination milestone. And
reservations fill very, very quickly, as far as I understand, often in 5 minutes.
Plenty of heat in the forecast. City pool reservations are in high demand. But good news, more spots are opening up soon. For nearly 3 decades, Ralph Thistle served the City of Toronto as a police officer, but his career was cut short due to PTSD. Now the Métis elder is living in squalor with no running water. Months ago, he was awarded 15 years of lost wages, but as John Lancaster explains, he has yet to see a penny of the hundreds of thousands he is owed.
Former Toronto police officer Ralph Thistle lives in a small cabin near Mount Forest with his service dog Rupert. There's no money for a well or to install running water, despite Thistle being owed hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. He's been waiting more than 9 months for WSIB to pay him.
If WSIB fulfilled their part of the judge's order and pay me, I can get a well and get water.
Last September, the WSIB Independent Appeals Tribunal awarded Thistle 15.5 years in back pay after his police career was cut short in 2007. No longer able to cope with the stresses of the job, he resigned from the Toronto Police Service just months before being eligible for a pension. Thistle became penniless and homeless until moving into the cabin 6 years ago. He says he travels 46 kilometers return to get drinkable water.
So I'm living really in a developed nation as a third world person. After 30 years of service with the Toronto Police Service.
A spokesperson for the WSIB says when the Appeals Tribunal awarded Thistle 15.5 years of lost wages, it didn't set an exact dollar amount. We make every effort to provide recovery and health services and benefit payments as quickly as possible. In some instances, it may take longer than any of us would like to gather all the information and documents required to calculate relevant payments, especially for claims dating back many years. Thistle is a 64-year-old Métis elder from the Great Lakes Indigenous Council and volunteers helping others with PTSD.
I think there's a lot of officers out there that are suffering in silence.
Toronto Police Association President John Reid says it's not known how many officers suffer from PTSD, as some don't come forward. In 2016, Ontario brought in so-called presumptive legislation, meaning first responders no longer have to prove their PTSD was work-related. Still, the compensation process can get bogged down by appeals from employers who challenge the amount owed.
It can be anywhere from a year to 2 or 3 years to get these matters heard before the tribunal, and that is an issue.
I feel WSIB is chewing on my soul.
For Thistle, it's meant relying on the generosity of family, friends, and the Métis Nation of Ontario to get by. After CBC News began investigating the situation, Thistle said WSIB called to say some of his money will be sent soon. John Lancaster, CBC News, Mount Forest, Ontario.
A Toronto teacher charged with criminal negligence causing death testified in his own defense today. Nicholas Mills is on trial after 15-year-old student Jeremiah Perry drowned while on a canoe trip to Algonquin Park 4 years ago. Mills, who has pleaded not guilty, testified he didn't follow rules requiring students pass a swimming test without wearing a life jacket and that all lifeguards on the trip be over 18 years old. Talia Ricci has more.
In the witness box, Nicholas Mills broke into tears when talking about how the challenges of a canoe trip can be an analogy for life and how he often relayed that to his students. Prosecutors allege the C.W. Jeffries teacher neglected safety rules and requirements related to the multi-day excursion during which 15-year-old Jeremiah Perry drowned. Perry was among 15 students on the trip who had failed a required swim test days before. The Crown has alleged Mills was aware many students didn't pass because they wore life jackets during that test. Perry was last seen walking into Big Trout Lake without a life jacket on. OPP divers found his body the next day at the bottom of a steep and sudden drop 13 meters from shore. Mills testified he thought Perry passed the swim test and that students who wore life jackets for the test had to wear them on the trip. He said staff at Sparrow Lake never required participants to go without a life jacket during the mandatory pre-excursion swimming test. Mills added he didn't follow certain safety guidelines established for the trip because they didn't reflect industry standards and would have prevented some kids from participating. Mills told the court, if a kid has a learning disability, they get more time to do a test. If a kid can't swim that well, you give him some assistance so he can still go on a canoe trip. Mills said he saw the Ontario Physical and Health Education Association guidelines as a framework used with your own personal skills. But he acknowledged that if he wrote in the paperwork that they weren't being met, that someone above him wouldn't have let the trip happen. His defense lawyer has argued that Mills may not have been compliant, but that didn't make the trip unsafe. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario is reporting 210 new cases of COVID-19 as more adults become eligible for their second shot. The cases are the lowest daily count since September 2020. The numbers come as the province continues with its accelerated vaccine rollout plan. As of today, all Ontarians aged 18 and older who have received their first dose of an mRNA vaccine will be eligible to get their second dose appointment. The appointments will be scheduled at least 28 days after the first shot. Right now, more than 33% of Ontarians 12 and older have had both shots. Toronto took a huge leap forward in the vaccination effort this weekend. Yesterday's event at Scotiabank Arena shattered a single-day record in administering doses with more than 26,000 people getting vaccinated there. Now the city is trying to keep up the momentum with more appointments and eligibility. Greg Ross has more.
Vaccination appointments in Toronto are still very much in demand. This downtown clinic had some of its longest lines today.
Oh yeah, pretty huge. It's sort of wasn't expecting this because the time slots for appointments are all relatively tight.
But most didn't seem to mind a bit of an extra wait.
It's hopeful. It means that, so many people are getting vaccinated.
I'm originally from the States, and I know there's a huge issue there with people being not really wanting to take the vaccine, and it's really nice to see how many people are lined up. Beautiful day now.
This was just a continuation of what we saw over the weekend when 105,000 people in Toronto got a shot.
That huge number includes the more than 26,000 doses administered yesterday at Toronto Vaccine Day at Scotiabank Arena.
Hello, Health Carter photo ID.
Mayor Tory says he's already considering more events like this. He's also announced the expansion of eligibility for younger people booking a second dose.
As of this morning, everyone in Toronto, including young people aged 12 to 17, is eligible to book an accelerated second dose of COVID-19 vaccine.
With an expected surge in demand, the city is opening up thousands of new appointments.
The City of Toronto immunization clinics will be adding 375,000 vaccination appointments.
While second dose appointments are on the rise, there are some concerns about those who still haven't gotten their first shot. Of the 26,000 people vaccinated yesterday at Scotiabank Arena, less than 1,000 of them were there for their first shot.
The vaccination thresholds we talked about, they're obsolete. They're not viable anymore for the Delta variant.
Dr. Peter Uni is the scientific director of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table. He says the Delta variant is 2 to 3 times more transmissible than the original strain of the virus. And because of that, a high number of people need to be fully vaccinated.
Things are changing as we go, and it's clear with the new Delta variant that we need to make it way above 80% to have sufficient protection of the population.
Right now, about 76% of Toronto adults have their first dose, while about 40% are fully vaccinated. Uni says he believes in order for the city to move into stage 3 of reopening in July, he hopes to see a percentage of fully vaccinated Torontonians at least 50% and around 80% with their first shot. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
The Premier was asked again today about the possibility of accelerating the reopening process as cases drop and vaccinations surge. Following the province's own reopening criteria, we've vaccinated enough of the population to move into step 3 now, which should see the return of most indoor activities. Doug Ford was non-committal, though, but says we'll get there soon.
You know, I want to get things open as quickly as possible. I think it's going to come sooner than later. The numbers dropped again, and we need to get the economy booming. The only few things that aren't open are the indoor dining, which is going to happen, and really outside of the casinos and strip joints. They're the only 3 things that aren't open now.
Ford says we have to be cautious with the highly contagious Delta variant continuing to spread, and he'll follow the advice of the health table and chief medical officer. In the meantime, the province enters step 2 of its reopening plan this Wednesday. It allows personal care services to reopen at 25% capacity, and outdoor dining limits increase from 4 to 6 people per table. NDP leader Andrea Horwath is calling for targeted reopening support for those businesses.
We keep hearing from a number of different sources in the business world that it's going to be touch and go for a lot of businesses. Even once they're able to reopen, if they don't get the supports they need, they may not be able to keep their doors open. So not only does that impact the business owners and their families, but of course all of the workers who are not going to be able to get back to work.
Horwath says the Safe Reopening Grant would help with costs like PPE, plexiglass barriers, and extra staff needed for health screening and contact tracing. She adds the grant would also help keep staff on the payroll while businesses are not allowed to operate at full capacity. It is a perfect day for jumping into one of the city's public pools, but that hasn't been the option for most of the day. Dale Manuknak joins us live from Kiwanis Pool in East York. And Dale, that pool and many others only opened a couple of hours ago.
Well, Dwight, as you can see behind me, there is a lineup forming here. They just let in one group to the pool about 25 minutes ago. A previous group left. They cleaned, they sanitized, got it ready for this next block to move in. But pools are open now, operating on a modified schedule and at reduced capacity. Reservations are encouraged here at Kiwanis Pool. All of the spots today are booked up. Last I checked, there was some availability for tomorrow at around 7, but these operating hours aren't doing anyone any favors for people today who are looking for some relief from the heat. With temperatures in the high 30s, a dip in the pool sounds just about right. Unfortunately, they were all closed until 4 p.m. Sloan and Reich and Hawk hit the beach instead. You guys were going to go to the pool today?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
It was closed.
From Sunnyside Gus Ryder Pool at the lake to Alex Duff at Christie Pitts Park, it was the same disappointment.
I know the Parks and Rec department, the workers do a great job. I do wish that the hours were more. This is a key, public service, have pools for the kids.
Chris Bielkowski was able to walk in yesterday.
We showed up 15 minutes before the session was scheduled to start. Yeah, we were the first in line.
When you only have a certain number of...
A few hours later, a different story. Emily Reed took this photo of a long line to get in.
I arrived at 2:35 for the 3 p.m. Slot, and there were already, I'd say, probably 75 people in the walk-in line in the full sun. So we knew there wasn't much chance of getting in.
Every pool has different reservation and walk-in splits to adjust for their community. Reed believes it should be all walk-ins.
But the city managed it really, really well last summer. It was walk-in only. There were no advanced slots, but it was always on the hour, and people only had a 45-minute slot. So it really allowed the pool to be shared with as many people as possible, even though capacity was limited.
While splash pads are open, wading pools remain closed for another 2 days. Near this Dufferin Street one, children still manage to have fun in the sand pit. The city says capacity for public pools will remain at 25% when Toronto moves into step 2 of the provincial government's reopening framework on Wednesday. Dwight, Wednesday will mark the first day of summer break for all students, and hours of operations will change. Pools will open at 12 instead of 4, and again, reservations are encouraged. The city releases new swim spots every Thursday at 8 a.m. for the following week, with some spots held back for walk-ins, and those spots are given out first come, first serve. And it is very hot right now. I might get into this line, Dwight.
And I think the 7 o'clock you mentioned for tomorrow, that little spot, it's now gone. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
I had nothing to say, Carl. I'm just going to do this. Whew.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh boy, I know. Hot enough for you. I said it. Yeah, we are looking at this extreme heat, and we certainly know what's going on as well in Western Canada. We're going to talk more about that. But the heat we have here, pretty sticky conditions. These are just the temperatures similar to yesterday. We're at 31 degrees. I say just. I mean, we're in the low 30s, right? Oshawa at 31 as well. The nation's capital, 32 right now. And then we're going to factor in the humidity, and it's low 40s for Windsor, so into southwestern Ontario, 40 degrees in Ottawa, and okay, we're kind of close enough here. Even St. Catharines in the low 40s. So we know it, we're feeling it. Excessive heat warnings, the areas that you see here in this sort of pinkish red, and all the other areas, we have the special weather statement. Just kind of letting you know, I mean, it's obvious if you go outside, but just that you need to take it easy, and especially those with any respiratory issues. We got a little ways to go with this yet. There's just the tiniest bit of change that we'll see as we go into tomorrow. But if you're looking for a really significant change in how the air mass feels, that doesn't come till about Thursday. And oh yes, that aligns with Canada Day, right? A few isolated showers here, thunderstorms too. You can see the lightning strikes popping up, headed towards the Hamilton region. A few more back close to southwestern Ontario. Otherwise, we don't see much in the overnight hours through the GTA. Different story tomorrow. We will get into some showers popping up into the later afternoon and evening. Some thunderstorms added to that. So a little more widespread wet conditions coming our way for tomorrow. 22 overnight tonight, 28, it's better than 31. Feeling, though, like 37, Dwight.
Ooh, thank you, Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
Oh, a pressure cooker of hot, humid air over Western Canada is set to push temperatures to new highs there this week. We'll bring you the latest from those provinces a little later in the show. Ontario Premier Doug Ford stopped short of calling for a cancellation of Canada Day festivities this year in light of the discovery of hundreds of bodies at two separate residential school sites in Canada. Ford does hope people will mark the holiday differently.
Just ask Ontarians to reflect over Canada Day on what has taken place. And I just want everyone in the First Nations community right across Ontario and Canada to know that we have their backs.
The Ontario government has earmarked $10 million to search for remains at sites that operated in the province. Ford also said earlier today that he is asking Education Minister Stephen Lecce to review the curriculum to reflect teachings of what happened in residential schools across the country. He says teaching the history is, quote, absolutely essential. The discovery of as many as 751 unmarked graves at a former residential school in Saskatchewan has added to fuel calls for change, action, even criminal charges. As Aaron Brahman shows us, as those at the center of the trauma work through what comes next, Canadians across the country are making sure they're not alone in their grief.
In a show of support from Winnipeg's Sikh community, more than 100 riders headed to the site of a former residential school today in Brandon, Manitoba. Organizer Bava Dillon is of both Sikh and Cree heritage.
They wanted to pay respect to the residential school system, to the kids who never made it home.
The ride began with an Indigenous prayer, then a Sikh one, as people reflected on the discoveries of unmarked graves at the Kamloops and Marival residential schools. Jaspreet Singh says many new Canadians didn't know this part of Canada's history.
It's really shameful. By doing this right, we might not make a big difference, but we are only trying to let the Indigenous people know that we know about the situation now.
Last night, a vigil was held at the site on Kawasis First Nation. 751 lights, one for each reported unmarked grave. It's illegal under Saskatchewan's Cemeteries Act to remove a headstone. But Chief Delorme says it happened here around 1960 by a Roman Catholic priest.
So that is why we are treating this like a crime scene at the moment.
The Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Regina knew the graves were unmarked and says the discovery of so many is a call to action.
About the legacy of residential schools and the abuse that took place there, the removal from families, the deprivation of parents, of language, of culture, of spirituality.
Back in Manitoba, Elder Raymond Mason followed the motorcycles by car, thinking of his own time in residential schools.
And it just hurts me.
because I could have been one of them.
We need to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Indigenous people and to let them know that at this hard time, we are with them.
And on this highway, beside them, on the journey forward. Erin Broman, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Speed cameras captured more than 20,000 drivers disobeying the limits throughout Toronto in April. More than 22,000 tickets were doled out using 50 automated enforcement devices. 1,500 of those tickets were given to repeat offenders. Data found fewer speeders than in March, something Mayor Tory called an encouraging drop. The area most prevalent with fast drivers, Shepherd Avenue East in Scarborough. That camera issued 16% of the tickets. It's one of the city's most well-known streets. Now Dundas has moved a step closer to getting a new name because of the Henry Dundas's efforts to delay the abolition of the slave trade.
Dundas Street was a case, by itself, in the sense that I had asked for a specific report in light of all the interest that and concern that existed in the community about Dundas Street and about Mr. Dundas, and we came back with a very thorough report, and including an extensive process of consultation on that subject. And so it could be dealt with on a one-off basis, and now does form the basis of a recommendation to City Council and to the Executive Committee.
Mayor Tory and city staff are recommending renaming Dundas Street following a 2020 petition to scrap the name. A staff report will go before the city's executive committee on July 6th. Henry Dundas was a Scottish politician who is accused of being instrumental in delaying the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. The city report outlines a renaming process along with a community advisory committee of Black and Indigenous leaders and local Dundas Street residents and businesses. After a long and challenging school year, teachers, parents, and students are closing the chapter. While some grads are putting it all behind them, others are concerned about what the fall school year might look like. Dali Ashry has more.
It's a big day for Aaliyah Gisildo.
Today I have a drive-through for my graduation, and I'm going to be receiving my diploma.
Despite the decorations and pre-celebrations at home, after a long school year, she's disappointed with this send-off.
As soon as Doug Ford announced that we could have had an outdoor ceremony, we could have all just started to get together as a school community, have our parents involved, guardians involved, and actually make that into a reality.
Amy Zhang is a grade 11 student at Earl Hague Secondary School. She's looking forward to graduating next year, but she's nervous about the new modified semesters model. Students will take 4 courses each semester, 2 a week, then switching to the other 2 the next.
Teachers are trying to cram in so much lessons and so much knowledge in maybe, 2 months or so. It's going to be quite hectic.
Before classes resume, students and parents will choose to learn virtually or learn in class. But education union leaders say the Ministry of Education should be funding a safe return to classrooms for all students.
This government must stop its defunding agenda. It must stop its privatization agenda, and it must properly fund schools so that every student can return safely to in-person learning in September.
The Ontario Liberals agree.
Virtual learning is not an ideal scenario for anyone.
But Ontario's Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, says virtual learning is an option for immunocompromised students, and the province is funding for a safe return to classrooms in September.
Like in Toronto, they've reduced, all boards overwhelmingly reduced the classroom sizes beyond the average, $450 million for air ventilation. We've set aside $80-odd million for testing this year, $85 million for learning recovery and summer learning loss, $80 million for mental health. We've literally just invested right across the board.
As for Zhang, she's hopeful for a safe return back to school in September.
Get checked in every single day, every morning we enter school, and as vaccines are rolling out, I think that it's going to run smoothly.
Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
A man has died in an industrial accident on the York University campus. It happened around 11 this morning at a construction site for the school's continuing studies building. The man, who police say was in his early 60s, was struck by a pane of glass that fell as it was being lifted by a crane. The victim died at the scene. The Ministry of Labour is now investigating. At least 10 people are now confirmed dead in last week's Florida building collapse. More than 150 people are still missing as the search for survivors continues into day 5. Desperate families are holding out hope that their loved ones may still be alive. Katie Simpson with the latest now from Surfside, Florida.
There is still a chance that there are survivors amid the debris and rubble here in Surfside, Florida. After more than 100 consecutive hours of searching the debris pile, local authorities say that yes, this remains a search and rescue operation. Many of the families, friends, and loved ones of the missing are growing increasingly frustrated about the lack of news, lack of information, lack of discoveries from that search and rescue site. However, local authorities are trying to explain to those families with patience and kindness that this is an incredibly difficult situation. They understand their frustration, wanting to know the whereabouts of their loved ones under these horrific conditions, but that this is an operation that has to move slowly and methodically.
We're digging through, again, rubbles of concrete, the size of basketballs, the size of baseballs, and then and only then, in combination with the safety of the personnel, and of course, considering, the victims themselves, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a 12-story building.
It's not just the friends and families of the missing that are going through incredible grief at this time. Survivors questioning why they were so lucky to survive, and survivors' guilt is going to be a factor here. We spoke with a man named Moshe Candiotti who's trying not to think about that. He was one of the first to actually escape the building. He lived in a unit on the 4th floor.
I felt the floor shaking, my bed was shaking. I got up, I got worse a little bit. Then I went to the balcony, I see a lot of fog, not fog, smoke and debris from behind, but I heard a lot of rumbling. It's scary. For like 30 seconds, the most scary I've been in the Israeli army. I wasn't scared, but in that thing, to the situation, you feel lost.
We caught up with Mr. Candiotti today as he was on his way to his synagogue with a check to give a donation to ensure that the families of the missing are supported. He sees it as his way to give thanks. He calls his survival a miracle. He owes it to God, he says, and that's how he says he can give back the only thing he really can do as this search and rescue operation continues. So many families going through so much grief and anguish as they wait for any new information. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Surfside, Florida.
Cleanup is ongoing in Chatsworth outside of Owen Sound after an EF1 tornado touched down there on the weekend.
So if you look closely here, you can actually see the scud feeding up into the updraft of the storm.
The twister ripped through the community and damaged several structures late Saturday afternoon. At least one home was destroyed in Chatsworth, leading the community to rally around the family. CBC News spoke to them.
My father-in-law called and just said everyone's okay, but your house was hit by a tornado, and I thought he was joking.
It was really, really quick. I keep describing it as maybe 5 to 10 minutes from when we just saw the furniture fly off the deck to when the wind just stopped, and then we peeked out from the basement and saw half of the house gone.
The family is now staying with neighbors. A GoFundMe has been set up by friends at the local church. It has already raised more than $25,000. Summer is just a little more than a week old, and already heat alerts have been posted in many parts of our country. In Western Canada, the hot weather has persisted for several days, and both Alberta and British Columbia are sweltering.
Stay hydrated, use sunscreen, wear a hat, and as well to just be really, really careful of kids and pets inside of vehicles.
A massive heat dome stretches from BC to Manitoba and north into the territories. The town of Lytton, BC, 300 kilometers north of Vancouver, hit 46.6 degrees yesterday. That's the hottest temperature ever recorded in Canada. Today, humidex readings are climbing into the 50s, and several school boards have canceled classes because of the heat. High temperatures are expected to persist into the weekend and push through Alberta into Saskatchewan. Aaron Collins takes a look at how people are preparing for the soaring temperatures.
Temperatures in Vancouver flirting with 40 again, an unprecedented heat wave chasing many people outside.
I don't remember it being this hot this early before. It feels like we've had a really hot spring and early summer.
For some, the hot weather is something to embrace.
Doesn't feel like Vancouver, but it's an interesting experience. Yeah, it's been nice getting outside, but we've basically been consuming gallons of water the whole time.
But the warm weather isn't fun for everyone. As temperatures spike in BC, concerns about vulnerable people are on the rise. Jack Gibson has Alzheimer's and lives in a long-term care facility in Aldergrove.
The facility that my father's in doesn't have air conditioning. And from my perspective, that's heart-wrenching.
As the mercury rises on both sides of the Rockies, emergency personnel in Alberta are bracing for more calls there, warning of the dangers of extreme heat.
Whether you have harder breathing problems or even if you're an elderly person, sometimes you just don't cope quite as well in the heat and sun.
With all that heat headed east, preparations are already underway. Homeless shelters stocking up on water, and demand for air conditioners is soaring, leaving installers scrambling to keep up.
That's 4 times as much as what we typically see, especially in June. Usually we don't get this heat till July, maybe August, so definitely surpasses what we've ever seen before.
Of course, all those air conditioners could strain the electricity grid, prompting this call from Alberta's electricity system operator.
If you can avoid using your washer, dryer, your dishwasher, and maybe not turn your air conditioner quite as high, that can help us out.
And that heat is coming. Alberta could start breaking temperature records of its own as early as tomorrow. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
The heat is also being felt in the U.S. The Pacific Northwest has been baking in the same heat wave. Seattle is experiencing consecutive days of temperatures in the 40 degrees Celsius range. That's something that's never happened there before. Portland, Oregon hit 44 degrees. Officials are concerned the temperatures will lead to increases in heat-related illness in the region where many don't have air conditioning. California is also experiencing the extreme weather, and it's causing concern about wildfires. Crews already have their hands full battling a number of blazes. Wildfire season started 2 months earlier than usual this year. Most of California is experiencing what's being called an exceptional drought. Every time we talk about these things, Colette, we say, you know, these things are happening. The highest temperature ever reached in our country. We've hit that.
Yeah, that's right. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing it in Canada. We're seeing it in the U.S. So North America, our continent, is on fire in terms of the heat that we have. I'm going to start with kind of the short term of what's happening. What is the weather pattern? But Dwight and I always talk about, what about these 1 in 100-year floods? How come we keep having them every few years? An event like this, where you get a heat dome like this for the duration that we're seeing it, and for the extreme temperatures, like just how hot it is, that's a kind of used to be a 1 in 1,000-year sort of thing. And here it is that we're dealing with. I've got the contours on here, kind of where the temperatures should be, and then popping to where they are. There have been a few things happening. The weather pattern is, we had a Rex block, which is when you get high pressure over low pressure, but essentially it's just this area that is broken off from the upper winds, from the regular weather patterns, so it's closed off, and it keeps the conditions just the way they are without moving so much from west to east, the way we expect weather to move, but more we see it kind of from the latitudes, the higher latitudes, and then pushing down into the lower latitudes here. So we're moving into more of an omega block. Well, it just means we're going to see some of this heat. Yeah, it's finally moving. Well, it's spreading east into Alberta and into Saskatchewan, and seeing all the excessive heat warnings going up there. It's going to be another few days, especially for the interior BC. We'll see along the coast getting into some relief by midweek, and by relief, I just mean coming down a bit. They're still going to be above normal. But look at this trend. This is for tomorrow, what we're talking about for some of the temperatures. So pardon me, we keep getting into the situation where it's like, oh, the hottest of all time, and then the next day it's the hottest of all time. So there may yet be records broken there, not daytime records, of all time for the entire country that we're seeing. Finally, into the interiors, we get to about Thursday, Friday. They'll come down a little bit before that, but really where it starts to change. And then we talk about the big picture, the drought, right, that we're seeing that goes all the way down into the southwestern U.S. This is just self-fulfilling. You get dry conditions. The temperatures then can get hotter than they have in the past, because any way to take that heat away would be through evaporation of any moisture in the soil, but you have less moisture in the soil to take the heat away. So hotter temperatures leads to more drought, and then that leads to hotter temperatures. So this cycle is just going to keep going. Yes, are we into some hot, sticky conditions? We are. We have a couple couple of days of this, and then we're going to start to see real improvement by about Canada Day. The only thing I'll tell you is the unsettled conditions. So we have scattered showers into tomorrow, into Wednesday, and there's even a chance for Canada Day, and then it gets a little bit quieter after that, Dwight.
Busy time on our continent weather-wise. Thank you, Colette.
It sure is. You're welcome.
The Bloomington GO station in Richmond Hill officially opened its doors today. The state-of-the-art facility at Highway 404 on Bloomington Road is designed to be environmentally friendly.
What makes this station very special for us is the fact that we've got solar panels on the roof. We've done a lot to make this a conservation-friendly and environmental-friendly investment. We've got ponds outside where frogs can migrate. We are planting about 327 new trees and about 19,000 different shrubs. And we've invested significantly in the environmental friendliness of the station.
The station features a secret underground passageway for frogs that allows them to travel from the existing pond on the site to neighboring wetlands. The fully accessible station has 3 levels of parking, as well as bike shelter and scooter parking with direct access to the platform. It also has heated shelters and an integrated snow melt system for the winter months. As we head to break, let's take a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX closed down by 85 points. The Dow was also down by 151 points, and our dollar traded lower at 81.07 cents US. Stay with us. We'll be right back. It is Pride Month, and people around the world are celebrating. Some events have been canceled again this year or gone virtual due to the pandemic, but not all. Some artists are returning to the stage. For more, we're joined now by Yelena Adzik. And Yelena, walk us through some of the performances in honor of Pride celebrations.
I was going to say, should I walk us through or should I dance us through?
Dance.
Because it really was. Dance? Should I dance? Listen, Dwight, you're going to be dancing after you hear this. Miley Cyrus gives this concert, and it's called Stand By You. She peppers it with some words of encouragement, as well as, words to say for people to fight injustice. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of that, but also the pulsing energy right now.
Whatever the challenge you're facing may be, love is never wrong. As Mama Ruth says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen? All we have to do now is take these lives and make them true. All we have to see is I don't belong to you, and you don't belong to me. Yeah, freedom.
You better be moving a little bit, Dwight, because that was pretty pumped up energy. And, same goes for Madonna. I have to tell you that people went to an event. It was a fundraiser for LGBTQ plus charities, organizations, and they did not know that up on the bar, on the countertops, would be dancing and singing Madonna. Have a listen. I can't show you much more than that because it doesn't get so family friendly, but it is Madonna after all, right? She can do whatever she wants. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. So, yeah, there's some prominent Canadians also talking and posting during Pride.
Yeah, and they wanted to take it not just from a celebratory standpoint, but also pushing the boundaries forward in terms of trying to make change happen. So I'm going to give you a look at singers, sisters, Tegan and Sarah. They started a zine. It's like this online magazine called In Our Image, and they say it's a celebration of unique identities, important stories, and how we support each other through friendship. So that can be found at teganandsarahfoundation.org. So that's teganandsarahfoundation.org, and their zine is just right up there on the front, and it's free. Also, Elliot Page, the actor, and now also freedom fighter, #protect Trans Kids was what was shared on Instagram. And that particular shirt, the sweatshirt that you see there, a percentage of the proceeds from all of those items sold, they went to different organizations, including the Trans Justice Funding Project. So that was just, 2 highlights from Canadians, but the world at large in the sports world, we knew of big news from Carl Nassib because the Las Vegas Raiders defensive end, he openly came out as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. That was just June 21st, so not that long ago, and made NFL history by becoming the first active openly gay player. And he also pledged $100,000 to the Trevor Project to help youth. And then also Laverne Cox wanted to share this one on Instagram. I bring all of me into Pride Month. I believe true liberation must be intersectional. I hope the legacy of the many feminist Black women who gave us this essential framework of intersectionality. So she says she honors that legacy. So that's just a sampling of a few of the people who wanted to both celebrate and also to push forward when it comes to progress. Dwight?
Yeah, that football player, I really liked what he had to say as he was coming on. I hope more people read or listen to what he put out on Twitter. Thank you for this,
It was
Yelena.
pretty special.
It
yeah,
really
you got
was.
It, Dwight.
It really was special. Thank you. The strawberries and cream are back. 10,000 liters of cream and 28,000 kilos of strawberries, all to be consumed by tennis fans attending Wimbledon 2021 over the next 2 weeks. The return of the tournament isn't just a test for the players, but for Britain's fight against COVID-19. Tessa Arcilia explains.
We're here in front of the All England Lawn Tennis Club. It is day one of Wimbledon, the first day that it is back after having closed last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the first time that's happened since the Second World War. Now, today is also a big day because this event has been given special status by the government as a test event. Essentially, they're trying to examine how transmission of the COVID-19 virus happens in big events like this. It'll be part of the phase 3 of the government's plan to reopen the country and hold big events like this one moving forward. Now, they're starting off at half capacity, trying to move up to full capacity by the time the finals come. Now, inside in center court, there was a long line already, people waiting to get in. And it took a while for them because security was checking, first of all, their tickets, and second, proof that they are either fully vaccinated or that they have a negative lateral flow COVID test.
It allows us to demonstrate some science and some data that can help other organisations and the world open up, certainly from a UK perspective.
Masks should be worn inside at all times while people are moving around, but they can remove them when they're seated. Now, the one thing that fans might not be able to do is they can't ask for autographs from tennis players, so distance will still be kept between the players and spectators, and even the players themselves will have to stay within that bubble, so a lot of measures in place. But, of course, the fans I spoke to today were just simply happy that this is happening at all. Take a listen to this.
I do love coming to Wimbledon. I love the experience, and I haven't been able to do it for a while because I used to teach and I couldn't come because of the timing. But this is the first time after my retirement that I'm able to come.
Some big names might be missing from this Wimbledon. Rafael Nadal will not be here, Naomi Osaka, and of course Canadian Milos Raonic won't be here. He's recovering from an injury, but we do have the big names. Novak Djokovic starting off in the center court as per tradition for the champion, reigning champion. Andy Murray will also be here, Ash Barty from Australia, and of course Serena Williams. Fans still have a lot of players, a lot of stars, tennis stars to look forward to seeing. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, Wimbledon.
I know your Leafs aren't there, but it is night one of the Stanley Cup Finals. And the fever is running high through the streets of Montreal, the entire province of Quebec, actually coast to coast, right across Canada. The final series begins in Florida tonight. Tampa Bay is defending its title. The Montreal Canadiens looking to lift the cup for the first time in almost 3 decades.
The Habs making it to the final is quite literally the electric shock everybody was hoping for.
For our kids who were babies at the time in '93 and they're huge Habs fans, it's like a thrill. It's like the first time they've ever seen this, so it's very exciting.
Yes, it is. Canada hasn't had a team in the final since Vancouver back in 2011. And you have to go back to '93 when Montreal achieved this country's last cup win. Someone who was born more than 2 decades after that win is extra excited for the series as he gets to watch the boys in action. Meet 3-year-old Liam. The Quebec youngster has been fighting cancer since February. His love for the Habs went viral on social media, and within 40 minutes, a generous donor offered up tickets for Game 4 1 week from today in Montreal. He's hoping to meet his favorite player, of course, goalie Carey Price. The puck drops in 1 hour in Tampa. All right, Colin, we were talking about the record we set for the highest temp in our country, and have we broken that already?
Yeah, Lytton, BC outdoing itself, breaking records that maybe it doesn't actually want to hold. You know, I was saying earlier that we haven't reached full daytime heating there yet, so that we might see things change. So yesterday, it was an all-time temperature record, not just for Lytton, not just for BC, for the entire country, the hottest we've ever recorded. That's yesterday, 46.6. Well, today, yes, and we may not be done here, 47 degrees. So now a new all-time hottest temperature recorded in Canada. And the forecast, by the way, for tomorrow is still right at about 47 degrees. So who knows what could happen as we look ahead towards tomorrow. Now, for our forecast, okay, does that put things in perspective? It's hot. It's not that hot. We are looking at scattered showers and thunderstorms tomorrow, 28, feeling like 37.
Yeah, well, good luck to our cousins out west. You're right. That number really puts things into perspective for us. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Stay safe. Have a great night, everybody.